and gentlemen, a hush settled around the room, mentioned. I'm Roger Law. I run Playhome Press. We had the pleasure of helping Paul to get this thing into book form. Welcome to the book launch. If there should be a fire, follow me. I'm going that way. It's really sad that Paul can't be here today, and we asked him if he wanted to come in. Come in. One here. So we did ask Paul if he wanted to postpone this, but he insisted we went ahead with it. So I'm videoing the book launch so I can let him see what happened. And afterwards, if you want to, I've got a copy of the book. If you want to write a message to Paul in the book, then I can pass that on to him. And you can write on flyers or the back pages, whichever you wish. Do come in.
Thank you.
Behind us. So I've worked with Paul over the last few months on this. Paul clearly started this during lockdown. Before lockdown, we had the idea, and he was working with Rose, I think, to make a bigger book. Then the pandemic happened, and he's now produced it on his own. But he assures me Rose has got enough material for another book, which may or may not be right. So, welcome to launch. All the money from this, every penny that you pay for the book is going to the DougieMAc. We were very kindly, Paul managed to get sponsorship from two local charities, from the Strasser Foundation and the Barracks Trust, who funded the whole of the printing costs of this, and Playhome Press has donated all its costs as well. So every penny goes to the DougieMAc, which is excellent. You'll hear from the DougieMAc a little later on. However, and there's still books on sale over there. Well, I'd like to hand over to Rose, who you all know anyway.
I know most
of
people.
you know, who's a local history and author, and is going to deliver as much as she can Paul's original address, which is accompanied by lantern slides.
Yes, it really is a tragic bad luck that Paul, having avoided COVID for over the last 2 years. Can you hear me now? Almost. Right. Okay, I'll shout. Has gone down with COVID this week. He's got a terrible sore throat, so he can't speak at all, and of course he's got some of the other very nasty symptoms of COVID. But he hasn't got any worse, and so we're all hoping that within a week or so, he will be back to normal. So I'm the stand-in, as Roger said. I will try and follow his script, which he passed to me through an open window, page by page, earlier this week. I was on the phone yesterday to him a couple of times, and his voice did sound stronger, trying to clarify one or two things. But as I say, I will follow his script, but if any additional knowledge and the comments that he would have made, I'm afraid you're not going to get much of it from me. Although I am familiar, certainly, with a lot of the book, because when we could get out in COVID, we could come here, but separately, one at a time was allowed in. So it's been difficult, and he's produced this super book, and I'm only sorry that he isn't here. So, let me see. Does anyone recognise that? Yes. Oh, sorry. I thought you were waving at me.
No, she's just going to get a bench.
Is this free? Thank you. You're saving it to me.
Anybody recognise it? Yes, Barry. It's where the Cloughs used to be. It's the other side of Galveston Road, I think. I have got one of the books. I think that house. Yes, I think that's the house there. This was working beautifully a while ago. Let me try it again. Right, that's come now. If I go back. No. This is the first time I've used this, so I'm sorry for being inept. That's the case. I'm going the wrong way. Okay, can you see now that that house is the house on the corner of the big roundabout at the end of Galveston Lane? The other side of Galveston Lane, there used to be a very big house called the Cloughs. I remember crawling through the cellars 40, 50 years ago. That has now all gone. But that's just to position it for the, as regards to Newcastle. This one we'll be returning to later. It's a 1933 aerial photograph, and Paul has kindly put where Priory Road is and Sneed Avenue is, and you can see the whole area is not yet built up in 1933, and we haven't even gone to the other side of Whitmore Road. So we will be coming back to that. His book is exploring history in Staffordshire and Newcastle under Lyme. And I have to remember to face that way. There we are. History starts in the present. He does want to make clear, that's the book, he does want to make clear that this is not the history of the Westlands, but a contribution to the history of the Westlands and some of the surrounding areas too. And he's on a mission, he admits, to sell a book saying, so today what he was going to say and what I shall be saying for him is to say enough about the book to excite your curiosity and make you want to buy it, but not so much as to spoil the read. So it's going to be very much an outline. He never intended this to be a book. I remember when we first spoke about this. Oh, I've gone backwards. I'll get it in there. And I'm being videoed as well, so that's great. Just imagine what he'll say. That's the book. He never intended it to be a book. He started off researching this project to make it into an article for a historical journal. And it all started really, I remember him first mentioning it, when he said looking out through the kitchen window. There it is. That is Paul's kitchen window, and look, he's taken a photograph looking out of it. And as he says, what does it all mean? Look at these houses. Who decided that they would go there? Who built them? When were they built? What is the history of the area before they were built? In other words, as he points out, the book starts in the present. That is the present. Where history also starts, we examine the past from a present standpoint. We are all affected by the world in which we grew up, by our backgrounds and by our education. And in fact, one sociologist in the 19th century actually said, all history is contemporary history. The writing of history, and we've seen a lot of examples of that recently, where people are now reinterpreting history very much so. You will get a totally different view of the British Empire now than you would have done in the 1930s if you read the history of it. That's just one example. So in other words, the book starts in the present. The inquiries into the past, of course, help us, hopefully, to understand the present in a much more substantial way. So, he's starting off with these houses. How did they come to be there? And he says, I have lived on the Westlands for 33 years, 56 years in Newcastle. Well, when I read that yesterday, that was the occasion for my first phone call because I said, you lived on the Westlands when you lived in Chester Crescent, and you live on the Westlands now that you live in Burn Avenue. No, it depends what you call the Westlands. We're going to have one of those discussions, aren't we? What do you call the Westlands? He refers to the Westlands as Chester Crescent. Where he lives now, he refers to as Thistleberry. I said to him, if you ask anybody in Paris Avenue where they live, they will tell you the Westlands. So we decided to resume this argument at another point when he's feeling stronger. He says that when he moved onto the Westlands, he heard people talk about how they understood the history of the estate to be and the people who lived there. But he said, do they tell the whole story? I mean, those of us who quote oral history all know that you have to be very careful what you believe, because it gets very distorted over time, and in my own family I've known plenty of oral history which is totally wrong, because it's quite impossible that it could have happened at that time. Now he lives close to the Butts, and hopefully I will be able to find a slide of the Butts. That's the corner, I think, of Geneva Drive going on to Paris Avenue, the Butts. So what were they, he says? Who used them and when? And he tells about a neighbour of his who recalls moving into a newly built house on this estate and finding the children finding bullets in the garden. So it's a rifle range. It was a rifle range. But for who used it, and when was it a rifle range? My recollection of this area is that the hills behind there, as kids, we call the sledging hills. Because I lived on Poole Field, so we used to come over and play in this area. So there's a lot to explore, and there's a lot of questions to answer. And he says, when all is done, will I look at the present with a more perceptive eye and a clearer understanding? When you have read the book, will you have a new view of the present? That's the intention. But you, as readers, are the judges. And he says, somewhat facetiously, that his first idea for the title was West Side Story. He thought it had a good ring to it, but as he said, it had already been taken and he couldn't cope with the idea you might want music and dancing. Right, so to move on. Thanks and acknowledgements. Well, there are plenty of people to thank and societies to thank. But first of all, he wants to thank all the people for the encouragement and the advice, the information and the finance, which we will get to in a bit. He says that many of you will be in this audience, and I imagine that that is correct. He says he hopes that in the book he has fully acknowledged you. If he hasn't, then he gives his apologies. So, what do you get for your money? Okay. Well, I'm, as I say, just going to give an outline here. Essentially, part of the book is concerned with the Butts and the barracks and what happened there and when and for how long. He's also going to talk about the Workhouse, Newcastle-under-Lyme Workhouse, which of course was on Keel Road, roughly where there were, until recently, some bungalows for retired people, but I think they might even have gone now. But it was that area of Keel Road, on the opposite side of Keel Road from Poolfield's estate. And then, of course, what many of you will be concerned about is the development of the actual Westlands. Now, we're going to have a debate about the Westlands and what he calls the Old Westlands and what he calls the New Westlands, and what I call the Old Westlands and I call the New Westlands, because I say there's an even newer one. And anyway, we will get to that. So a lot of the book is going to be concerned with the development of these various parts of the Westlands. Also, he will be talking about, to put the development of the Westlands into context, They'll be talking about the earliest council houses in Newcastle, some of which were actually on the Westlands, as you will see. And so he's talking really about it. This is a story of the borough of Newcastle transformed. And as every local historian here knows, unless you put local history into context, it's relatively meaningless. If you don't understand what's going on at the time and how your history, your local history, fits in with national developments, then you lose a great deal of the significance of local history. There are stories that aren't included. In fact, he's hoping that somebody will pick up the banner and carry on with this story. So he'd be delighted to hear if any of you would. Some stories were not included, the story of the golf club. I will briefly mention the schools that were held in the tennis pavilion by the tennis courts. He's done a couple of individual house histories, but it's not been possible to do, well, the book would be that thick if you did that. But there are some individual house histories, but he would like to have done more. The churches haven't been covered. So there's plenty left for someone to write another volume, and I'm sure you will be queuing up afterwards so that I can tell him who will be doing it. Other people that Paul wanted to thank, we've done that. Oh no, that's it. There we go. First of all, of course, the friends who contributed memories, photographs and documents to the book. Some fascinating stuff came from New Zealand. He does want to make it clear that none of these people are responsible for the conclusions that he's drawn from their contributions. So he's not, he wants to make it clear that his opinions about certain things might not necessarily be yours. It's the usual disclaimer that you find in magazines. Plus, he wants to thank those who helped financially, chief of which are the three at the top: the Strasser Foundation, the Barracks Trust, and Clayham Press, who published the book, and Roger is the publisher of the book here. And there are others, as you can see, who made some financial contribution to the book. Now again, we're back to what you get for money. So let's have a look at the books. Right, okay. So the books it's the location of where Paris Avenue is now, which was formerly also part of the Westlands Farm estate. In fact, I seem to remember when that estate was first built that it was, I think nowadays we refer to it as the Paris Avenue estate. I think they were used to refer to it as the Westlands Farm estate. The estate was developed from 1966. I remember it happening, as does Paul, and it took about 4 years to complete. But the history of it is to do with its name, or the name of part of it, the Butts. It was a rifle range used by part-time soldiers like these, who are on Wimbledon Common. Unfortunately, they aren't in the Westlands, but this is similar to the kind of organisation. And the Butts was a rifle range used by the volunteers in Newcastle. The barracks would seem to be their obvious base, but it's a bit more complicated than that. And this is something that Paul does explain in the book. There were different types of part-time soldiers at the time. The militia, the volunteers, the yeomanry were all different, set up from different classes of people and for different reasons. The barracks in Newcastle, which I'm glad to say are still there, were built in 1855. But they weren't built for the volunteers, they were built for the militia, which is a much older organisation. Goes back centuries, actually, the militia. The volunteers in Newcastle were a new unit that came together in 1860. 1860, and they were not based at the barracks. They didn't move into there until 1882. And this is the point where, for the first time in this talk, Paul would like your help, if possible, because a lot was owed to a man called William Henry Dutton. And he does actually put a biography of William Henry Dutton in the book. What he doesn't have is a portrait or a photograph. So if any of you know the existence of such things, and I know it sounds a long shot, but actually it's not that long a shot. It's amazing what people have got tucked away. Then we would very much like to know about it and borrow it, I don't doubt. Now, all these local actions exemplify a facet of the Victorian age in Britain, which is to a large extent excluded from the usual histories of that period. The National Rifle Association was formed in 1860, and you could compare it to the one that there's all the controversy about at the moment in America, the National Rifle Association there, but without the constitutional backing, unfortunately, the power. The volunteers were often portrayed as idiots, really. They were the subject figures of fun. They were regarded as incompetent, and you get this kind of skit that says the awkward squad, or the experience of the volunteer rifleman dedicated to his commander. Well, they aren't a very inspiring set of gentlemen, are they really? Rather slovenly, not exactly standing to attention. One's gazing up into the air, and the commander is a portly figure, a bit of a Colonel Blimp type. But Paul emphasises that they, and the militia and the yeomanry, were an example of a militaristic aspect of the Victorian age, which he describes as now conveniently forgotten. You will have to read through this and come to your own conclusions as to whether you agree with him or not. Stage B is walking around the western area of Newcastle, the area that we call the Westlands. Now, I'm sure you can identify them. Top left, Paris Avenue. Top right, I think that's Sneed Avenue, yeah. Bottom right, it could be, couldn't it? Whitfield Avenue it is actually, because it's on that particular part of Westlands. And finally, the corner of... Right, thank you. These are all different developments at different stages. Obviously, as I've already discussed, the Paris Avenue estate is 1960s, 1970s. The earliest developments on the Westlands are this: the Westlands Avenue, Whitfield Avenue area. Then Sneed Avenue at about the same time. Completely different developments. And then this is what some of us refer to as the Old Westlands, where you have that circle and you have the crescents and the roads leading off them. So yeah, I'm glad you agree with me, because I had to piece that together myself last night. The houses are different. If you look at the width of the roads, they're different. The width of the verges are different. And they're quite separate developments, as I've said. Collectively, all there is referred to as the Westlands now, but from very different periods of time and with very different intentions. Okay. Right, now this is a simplified plan of the housing estates to the west of Newcastle. Oh, bother. Right, okay. So there's the most recent, isn't it, really? The Westlands Farm Estate. Paris Avenue, the butts, the golf course there. That, of course, is Keel Road. I'm trying to do this without Keel Road, the Highland, old development, which we shall come to in a minute, if this thing will just behave itself. Rothsey Avenue, that area there, to my mind, was built just before Paris Avenue. This is Westlands 1, and that is the Whitfield Avenue area and Sneed Avenue. Westlands 2, you can tell where that is. That's around all the crescents, Elm Crescent, Beresford Crescents, Chester Crescents. These are largely post-war developments. Part of Sutherland Drive had actually been built before the war. Of course, the war put a stop to everything, but it was only so far down. And so I had £10 bet on with Paul, which I lost, about a house that my granddaughter lives in Dalton Avenue. That's Westlands 2, and then we've got a Westlands 2 plus there, which is Myatt Avenue. These were built on different farms at slightly different times by different people, collectively known as the Westlands. Now he asks a question here, what does this district mean to you? He says, have you been brought up in the Newcastle Potteries area and know there's something special about the Westlands? Paul is of course a foreigner, he comes from Yorkshire. He bought a house in Chester Crescent in 1966, and it's over time that he discovered different people's views of the Westlands. To some, of course, it was a great pride and municipal achievement. To others, it was all fur coat and no knickers. There was big association with the Westlands with Bourneville. I think some people actually associate the whole of what I call the Old Westlands with Bourneville, but that actually wouldn't be true. He says, there's the Old Westlands, the New Westlands, and the Westlands proper. I've told him that I disagree with him. I hope that you will back me up. He says, wherever you start with an investigation into a present concern, you're driven backwards. Were the stories reliable? Could more be found? What explanation is there for the development of the Westlands as we know it? Well, of course, one purpose of the book is to propose answers to all the questions. And the starting point, or one starting point, is a very good one if you're doing a location, is to look at maps. So I'm going to show you a map that was compiled by Robert Malabar in the 1850s. Okay. No. I'm going dizzy here. There. Malabar's map in the 1850s. So much of the Westlands area, which is around here, wasn't even in Newcastle. If you look at this map, you'll see various names that you'll think strange. So it was in the parish of Trenton, that part was, or this part was in the parish of Wolstanton and Trenton, and this part was in the parish of Stoke-on-Trent. There are a lot of small owners, as you can see, but a lot of the land was held by the Burgess Trust, which still exists in Newcastle. And there's a lot of open land, as you can see, variety of farm land here. So this is where he started off with this map. The Highland suburb, I mean this is Newcastle itself, this is the Highland. That was the most densely packed part outside Newcastle at that time. There's a little ribbon development starting to grow, where are we? Thistleberry Avenue, I think it's still down here, as Gallows True Lane. That's it there. Would that be about right? Yeah. Little ribbon development starting there. So he starts off with maps. The next thing that he moved on to are people, because as he says, it's people who make the decisions, and people who are now often forgotten. Although, in fact, if you examine the history of street names in Newcastle, you'll find a lot of these people who actually have streets named after them. So, also, he wanted to examine the circumstances in which these people made their choices. Now, the key people, of course, are the local politicians, because of the changed circumstances at the beginning of the 20th century at both the national as well as the local level. There was, in effect, a change in public attitude towards the provision of homes for working people. There were many reasons for this, but partly because there were such dreadful slum areas in Newcastle and everywhere that the health and therefore the efficiency of the working class was endangered. A crucial step came in the aftermath of the First World War, when, if you remember, I think it was Lloyd George who spoke about homes fit for heroes. And there was the 1919 Town and Planning Act. But in some areas, this had actually been anticipated just before the war, and Newcastle was one of these areas. Those are the oldest council houses in Newcastle. Still there, this is Stanley Street, and on the other side of the road, where's my little red dot? Stanley Street, the other side of the road is St Mary's Catholic School, where I went. Now, it does actually say on them, Corporation Cottages, 1990 or 1980? Or is it even earlier than that?
I think it's 15, right?
15, you're right. Thank you. Yeah, 1950. So these are before the 1919 Housing and Town Planning Act. And one man stands out as exemplifying Newcastle's experience of this change in attitude to working class homes. And that man is a man called John Mair. And if you know the Crossheath area, there is a Mair Avenue, a Mair Street there. Once again, there's an online biography of John Mair in the book, but again, he hasn't got a photograph. So if anybody's got a photograph of John Mair, you would be very interested to hear. And Mair's aim was to develop the land to the west of the old borough of Stoke-on-Trent, in other words, the Westlands. And the story unfolded in the book as the aerial photograph of Newcastle suggests. Go back to it again. Sneed Avenue running down, it looks huge on there actually, that green area in the middle of Sneed Avenue. You go down there at Sneed Avenue, of course, you will come to the golf course and the main road. I'm not doing very well because I'm going to get so told off. Sneed Avenue goes down, then the golf course is there. This is the Westlands Farm Estate, which is now Paris Avenue. This confused me for a bit. I have to look it all up. Anybody know what that road is? Wedgwood Avenue. Yes, it is. Because here's Priory Road, and then that'll be the main road through to Whitmore. And this is where the tennis courts were, or are. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. That's an aerial view that was taken in 1933. So it's a story with twists and turns in the 1920s, because also what was taking place was development of the other side of Whitmore Road, that estate that I showed you before, Pilkington Avenue, around there. That estate was built on land owned by Thomas Pilkington, so again this is where you get the name of the road from. That Sutherland Drive was the Duke of Sutherland's land, and it was previously let out as Hill Farm. There's a history of 3 or 4 farms associated with the Westlands. And that part of the Westlands is somehow the one that's associated with Bourneville Village, or correctly associated with Bourneville Village. And the whole story of the Bourneville Village Association and the man who I think's name was Robert Wilmot, you got Wilmot Drive up in Cross Heath, of course, how his book explains how all this came about. Now, all of it was not completed by 1939, when the war intervened. He says, although this book presents the story as one about Newcastle, it is also a national story in miniature, about the provision of the homes as a necessary condition for public benefit. Your verdict on the explanation given in the book of how this played out and the extent to which it feels it helps you understand the present state of Newcastle is awaited by him with interest. Another area, I'm going on longer than I should, another area, oh, this is the development of the that part that we're talking about. This is 1938. Still an awful lot of open land. In fact, I think when Paul lived in Chester Crescent, those were the last two houses that were built before the Second World War. Have we got a slide of the workhouse?
I think it's the one before that, isn't it? You moved to.
Yeah. Has it got one of the workhouse? If you could do. And you go back and see if there is one of the workhouse. Because another big topic that he tackles in the book is the workhouse which was on Keel Road, which was demolished in 1938, but it actually had ceased to be a poor law institution in 1930. And of course this opens up a whole new series for investigation, which is how does society respond to the existence of poverty. The poor law that operated until 1929 was the old Victorian poor law. And that subject, the subject of poverty and how it was dealt with, is one that also is part of the backdrop to this story of the Westlands. In fact, Paul does wonder whether the fact that the workhouse was on Keel Road in that western end of Newcastle was why it became, or it was thought of until the Westlands, as an unfashionable district. He certainly thought that it was a neglected part of the borough, and as I said, there's much more about John Mayer in the book. And is one of two local politicians who were significant decision makers in the process of developing the Westlands. The other one that I really would like to look into more myself, because Paul says he lacks a full biographical study, is Anthony Moran, or Tony Moran, who was one of my relatives. And I would like to really look back into him. He was a huge figure on the housing committee of the Borough Council in the 1920s, 1930s. He died in about 1942. There are several stories, as I said, that are not included. One of them is the use of the tennis pavilion as a school. And I don't know if there's anybody here who went to that school. I know that Paul has spoken to people who went to that school. And that's part of an interview that he did with one of the pupils. PNEU means Parents National Education Union. And I think this is a young woman, started school which was called St Lucy's, which initially was in St Giles's Parish Hall, at the bottom of Priory Road. So her mother took her there, but the next day when she took her there, it was closed, because it had been taken over by the armed services. So Miss Telford, the headmistress, found an alternative accommodation, which was the tennis court buildings. And St Lucy's School continued there throughout the war. There was another school nearby, which was Miss Bailey's School. And this is a photograph of some of the boys who went to Miss Bailey's School. And finally, I'll end up with another question for you. This is Kingsway West. And this always happens, and I've got friends here who've written books who will tell you that as soon as you finish your book and get it off to the printers, you find out something else. Don't you, Pam? The book had gone off to the printers. somebody else comes to see Paul who can tell him about the background and the individual houses that formed a terrace in here. He said it was too late for him to do anything with. That's another story which he hopes that you will pick up. I'm going to leave it there because I'm running out of printed words. I do hope that has helped to encourage you to read the book. It would have been totally different, of course, had Paul been here, and my apologies for any failings well, plenty of failings that happened during the course of the talk. But I do encourage you to have a look at the book and hopefully buy a copy. All the proceeds are going to DougieMAc, and we have Lynn here. Lynn?
Yes.
Who is a representative of the DougieMAc, who just wants to tell us a few things about that.
Shall we give Rosa?
Good afternoon, everybody. I would just like to thank you all for coming here. It's absolutely wonderful the support that Paul and yourselves have given to DougieMAc. As you know, DougieMAc is one of the strongest charities existing at the moment, and I think we all support it quite wholeheartedly. They've given me a few notes to tell you about DougieMAc, and DougieMAc first opened its doors in 1973. And in February next year, 2023, we'll be celebrating 50 years of providing exceptional end-of-life care for those facing a life-limiting illness in Stoke-on-Trent and North Staffordshire. So as you know, every year DougieMAc provides all hospice services free of charge to over 3,500 local people. Following the amalgamation in 2021 of the Children's Hospice, because as you know, DougieMAc was just catering for the adult people of Stoke-on-Trent, and then when sadly Donna Louise looked like it was going to close, they talked together and they decided to amalgamate, because nothing is more wonderful than having adult and children end-of-life care. So we go on to say that we now take care of everybody, both young and old, in two sites, Brampton and Trenton, as well as out in the local community. Here at DougieMAc, we are committed to expanding and improving our services, always striving to deliver the very best quality of care to meet the ever-needed changes occurring in communities like our own. The hospice is an independent charity. It receives no funding from any national charity and has no association with any organisations bearing the same or similar name. It will cost in excess of $15.4 million in 2022 to run and develop the full range of services for the hospice. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but 75% of the total sum is funded by donations from yourselves. And it's also donated by fundraising, also once again from the local community. This is why your donations of furniture, clothing, toys, linen, houseware, everything is so vitally important to us. So if you look at the little shop that we have in Westlands, it's only a little shop, but we don't have anything there that comes in new. Nothing is bought. Everything comes from your good selves. And with your support, our little shop is raising nearly £3,000 a week. And if you consider what comes in and what goes out, it's just wonderful. And we really, really are so grateful to your support. Our retail shops contribute significantly to the total sum of this $15.4 million needed for the year. Is a massive amount. So we couldn't do this without the donations, so please thank you very, very much, and we just hope you carry on to continue. We'd like to tell you a little about the adult services. We help adults living with cancer and non-cancer life-limiting illnesses, such as advanced heart failure, dementia, motor neuron disease, and incurable lung diseases. We provide each patient with the individual care needed to promote and maintain the best quality of life possible, and for as long as possible. I don't know if any of you ever been to go in and you're at peace straight away. It has a wonderful atmosphere, and the people working there are absolutely wonderful. I couldn't thank them enough myself. As well as providing specialist care for individuals during the final stages of their illness, we also provide short admission stays for patients who just require symptom control to help stabilise their conditions before returning home. We have a holistic package of care incorporating physical, psychological, social and spiritual support, and we offer that to all patients and to their families. Our friendly multidisciplinary team are on hand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, providing exemplary personalised care to ensure the safety, comfort and dignity of our patients. We're comfort, dignity and compassion wherever our patients are. That's why we offer care to our community 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whether that's over the phone or on a visit to your home, our community service offers patients more choice about their care than they would receive anywhere else. Then there's the children and young adult services. We enable children, young adults and their families to make the most of the time that they have left together. We help them to manage physical symptoms, give vital, emotional and psychological support, and help them to navigate the practicalities of changes in life. And when the time comes, we're there to ensure dignity, comfort and peace at the end of your life. The hospice's tenacity and ambition to offer the very best end-of-life care is demonstrated in the significant growth of our care team, which has allowed children's services to return to 7 days a week, including overnight care for children and respite for their families. The dynamic facilities within the Denise Coates Young Adult Building has also recently reopened, providing our teens with more independence to enjoy new experiences and create special memories with their friends. As you're quite aware, end of life is something no one really likes to think about. But if it can be approached with dignity and compassion, that's something that DougieMAc really aspires to achieve. And we couldn't do this without yourselves and without people such as yourself, all your donations, the contributions that you have actually in buying your books have given us today. I can't thank you enough, so thank you. Thank you on behalf of DougieMAc and everybody else. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And just in terms of book sales, we still have some left there. Don't despair if you can't buy one. They're available in every DougieMAc shop across the whole area from next week. And if you buy all of those, then we'll print some more. So, again, it's a great shame Paul couldn't have been here today. I have videoed it, so we'll let him have a copy of the video. And again, if you'd like to send a message to Paul, there's a copy of the book here. If you want to write something on the flyleaf or the back pages for me to give to Paul, then I'm happy to take that. So, once again, thanks very much to Rose. To stand in at the last minute and deliver somebody else's talk is a tremendous achievement. And to battle with the technology, which you've not seen before as well. You did an excellent job, and Paul would, I'm sure, be proud of you.
I don't think so, but thank you.
And don't forget, the tea shop is still open if you just have tea.
you.